Hello and welcome back to London Cycle Routes. Today I'll be showing you how to cycle from Deptford in southeast London to Camberwell in South London. This ride takes about 25 minutes and you can do the whole thing on quiet streets and protected cycle lanes. By public transport, the same journey takes around 40 minutes, so getting on your bike is a good way to save time for this trip. If you find this video useful or you just enjoy watching it, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, as I try to post new videos just like it every week. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel on Patreon. If you're feeling generous and you'd like to contribute too, then you can find a link in the description below the video. Alright, let's get going. So we're starting on Deptford High Street and we're going to turn down Hamilton Street. The first section of this route is on Cycleway 10, which is a signposted route put in by Transport for London. You can follow these green and blue signs like the one on that pole on the right, as well as the road markings on the floor which say C10 on them and have various arrows and cycle symbols pointing you in the right direction. C10 is generally really well done, and where it's not on quiet back streets with very little traffic, it generally has protected lanes like this one separating you from the few main roads that it does go on. I should mention that I'm so confident in the quality of this route that I actually recorded this video with my 2-year-old son on the back of my bike. I've cycled with him on there quite a bit, but this is the first time that I've actually recorded a video for the channel with him on there. Hopefully he will be joining me for future rides, and maybe one day he'll be able to ride along himself as well. For anybody wondering, he loves being on the back there, and you can sometimes hear him singing away to himself. Generally, we found the child seat pretty revolutionary for getting around. There are some trips that are just a little bit too far to walk and maybe not quite worth getting the bus or the train for, or maybe there's not good public transport coverage. And yeah, it really fills that niche, and it's genuinely been useful as well as just a whole lot of fun. Fun fact about the building on the left that we just went past, by the way, it was originally a propeller factory for aircraft and later turned into a paper bag factory. It's now an affordable workspace for artists run by a charity. Don't miss this left turn under the railway into Folkstone Gardens, by the way. I was very tempted to stop at the new playground on the left, but in the end playtime waited until we got to Camberwell. Folkstone Gardens was actually created in the 1970s. The houses that stood on this site were badly damaged in the Second World War. They originally housed railway workers who worked on the railway that we just went under. Now, I'm always intrigued by the development in front of us there, which is slowly taking shape. I say slowly because I think it's basically been under construction for the entire time that this channel has been running since 2021, even in the earliest videos. So here's your occasional update on its progress as of summer 2024 when this was filmed. Now, this next section of Cycleway 10 runs on a shared pavement / path. It's reasonably okay. There are some good things about it. It's pretty wide, has low footfall, has a decent surface, and is separated from the road by a grass verge, which are all positives. However, it does have one big flaw, which is how it interacts with side roads. You can see these what are called elephants' footprints on the floor. They're not, frankly, a real road marking. I don't think they have a legal status, and as a result it's a little bit ambiguous as to who needs to give way at those side roads. So do just be really careful as you cross side roads, including these material yards. Now, if you look on the right under the bridge, you'll see an empty concrete box here that's been closed off with metal grating. That is actually the basis for a new London Overground station called Surrey Canal Road, which would go on the East London line. I believe that the station concrete box there was built into the bridge when the bridge was redone, as passive provision in case a future station got funding there. After it looked for a while like it might be off the cards due to funding, it does now seem like it might be back on, so we could be seeing a London Overground station there. That does mean that we could also potentially be seeing construction disruption on Cycleway 10 in future. I don't have any solid information about when that might be or whether there might be a good cycle diversion. But I do hope when planning those works that TfL makes sure that Cycleway 10 stays open throughout the duration. Now we are on the Millwall path here, so called because it goes behind Millwall Stadium, the Den. Two things to note about it. One, that on Millwall match days it is sometimes closed for a couple of hours to facilitate access to the stadium, so especially if you're coming here on a Saturday, do check before you travel. The second thing is that there have been reports of muggings on this path at night after dark, so do make sure you take that into account before you plan a route down here. I've not personally encountered anything, but I have seen people say in the comments that they have seen people acting weirdly down there. I think there have been media reports as well, so just keep it in mind when you decide whether that's the sort of thing that bothers you or not. Now the wayfinding along most of this route is pretty good, and you should actually be able to follow signs more or less the whole way to Camberwell. But if you do need a little bit of help, just a reminder that you can always download a free map of the route, which will work on any app or device you choose to use. I've linked to it in the description below the video. It's in a GPX format and it should just work everywhere. It's a standard format that you can download. And while I'm talking about maps, I should absolutely mention the brilliant map of all the different London cycle routes videos, which was put together by viewer Isaac. Thank you so much for keeping that up to date, Isaac. It's really, really great. It's a brilliant way to browse the different videos and to see which videos that have been done which might be relevant to the routes that you might want to do, and to see whether I've worked any out. Now you might have seen that I made a little bit of a false turn there before turning back onto the path. I have a perennial issue on this with remembering which left turn I need to go down. But before we turn off, just look on the right there, because that's a lot of dogs that person is walking. Pretty cool. Now the correct answer to when you're supposed to turn off Cycleway 10 is actually just coming up here, but it's quite easy to miss. There is a green and blue cycleway sign, but it's actually some way after the junction. You can just see it materializing there in the distance, but we're actually turning off here. I think it would be great to have some sort of improved wayfinding there to help people recognize the turn off, because this route that we're on now, which is signposted as Cycleway 35, although I think calling it a cycleway is probably a little bit of a stretch. It's really just a link, is a really great way of getting between Cycleway 10 and the paths in Burgess Park, which is where we're heading next. Keep an eye on the wayfinding and do not miss this left turn into the estate down Morby Place, and then very quickly there's a further right turn which lines you up nicely with a cycle crossing to take you over the main road. Note the bollard there, which will keep the street nice and quiet by preventing cars driving down it. Just a reminder, by the way, that if you're enjoying the video and you're not yet subscribed, do just make sure you hit the subscribe button. All subscribing does is make sure that videos from this channel appear more frequently on your YouTube homepage. You can also click the little bell icon next to it, and that alerts you when new videos are posted on the channel if you're a big fan. And I should also take the opportunity to say a huge thanks again to everybody who's supporting the channel on Patreon. Really appreciate it, really helps keep the channel going. And if anybody else wants to join in, then you can find a link to the Patreon in the description below the video. Don't miss this turning off to the right here, and also note the slope, which my son very much enjoyed. Next, we use this crossing to get into Burgess Park. Regular viewers of the channel will already know that Burgess Park used to be a canal. It was turned into a park in the 1970s. Well, what's interesting in the context of the route we're doing today is that the Surrey Canal Road, which we were on before, also, as the name suggests, used to be a canal until it was filled in. In fact, it was more or less the same canal. That Surrey Canal Road would have continued dead straight into Burgess Park, except that when they were both turned into things that weren't canals, they built stuff in the way, so we had to take a little bit of a detour to go around it. Of course, above our heads here is the evidence that it did used to be a canal. The canal bridge, which is now a bridge to nowhere, was simply left over the path. The canal also, of course, had an arm to Peckham, which we would have been able to join by turning off left just before we entered Burgess Park. I've used it in a few routes. It's now the Surrey Canal Walk, and is quite a nice walking and cycling shared path heading into the heart of Peckham. Note the little blue sign above our heads there, by the way, which seems to be an adaptation of the classic shared space sign, not just for people walking and cycling, but also for dogs. Now, as we approach the lime burner, which is that brick structure on the right, we want to take the left-hand fork down a slightly wider path. There is a little bit of wayfinding here. You can see on the floor it actually says Q7. That's an old piece of wayfinding referring to Quiet Way 7. Quiet Way 7 as a route technically no longer exists. Confusingly, it's been renamed Cycleway 17, but we're in the park, and for whatever reason Southwark's Parks Department hasn't updated its signs, so while we're here it's Q7 like on the floor here, which we're watching out for, and that directs us out of the park. But as soon as we're out of the park, it turns into C17. Once you exit the park and cross into Edmund Street, you'll find yourself in what is actually called the Brunswick Park low traffic neighbourhood. This is one of Southwark Council's LTNs, and the streets around here are all really quiet due to a series of strategically placed filters and closures which prevent through traffic from using the area. The LTN creates a nice little cycle link down from Burgess Park right into Camberwell, and one interesting thing about it is that it was actually part funded by the Guy's and St Thomas's Trust charity, which is a local NHS linked health charity, and they chose this area I think based on the levels of health inequality and the good that they thought that improved active travel and cycling links could do, which is pretty cool. It's nice to see a sort of a public health intervention that almost prescribes active travel or improved transport infrastructure for an area to address health inequalities. A less promising example of public policy is on our right there. You can see that's a boarded up old public building. That is actually the former Camberwell Green Magistrates Court, whose closure was announced in 2016 as part of cost-saving measures by the Ministry of Justice. Of course, if you follow the news in the UK, you'll know that since then we have developed a long backlog in courts because the court system doesn't have the capacity to process all the trials it needs to. That backlog came almost immediately after a decision to close so much of the court's estate to try and save money. But anyway, we're here on Camberwell Green and we've made it to Camberwell Church Street, where this video is going to end. Thank you so much for watching. If you look at that map, you can see the point that I was making before about the canal. So Surrey Canal Road is going straight, and then we actually turn off it, do a little detour, but then we rejoin the old path of the Surrey Canal and the Camberwell Canal in Burgess Park, and it could have almost continued dead straight. The area that we have to detour around there is mostly sort of low-rise retail parks and industrial estates, so it wasn't built in a very permeable way, particularly for walking and cycling. You can see that there's not really a street that continues through that area, which I think is a shame. It would have been nice to have something like Burgess Park or the Surrey Canal Walk down to Peckham through that area, and would really have improved cycle links there. But anyway, just a reminder that you should subscribe to the channel. Hit subscribe, hit the bell icon. And I think I'm right in saying that this video was requested by someone in the comments recently. I hope that it suits your needs. And if anyone else has any requests, then do let me know in the comments as well. Thanks again to everyone on the Patreon, and if anyone else is feeling generous, you can find a link in the description below the video. I will see you guys in the comments, and next time, goodbye.